This is Unfiltered. Welcome. My name is Mike Ginn. This is a very special episode. Not only am I joined by the daughter of the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, Georgia Smith will be joining me today. But we got a special announcement. We got a new collection on Fighters First we're going to talk about. We've been kind of teasing it for weeks. So, guess what? We are officially making the announcement today. So I'll let Georgia handle that in just a couple minutes. But before we get into the announcement, Georgia, thank you for taking the time and sitting down with us on Unfiltered.
Thank you, Mike. We've been talking about this and now we're here and I'm glad, luckily we're in the same time zones. A lot of times when I do these, it's,
Same
from
time zone.
England.
We're like a zip code apart, I
We're
think.
like a zip code away. So this is perfect. And
I
I'm
mean, we really
excited.
could have sat down at a coffee shop and been like, here, let's just do that.
We could have. We could have.
But schedules are what they are, and here we are on the great internet recording this episode. George and I have been talking for a while about getting her late great father into our shop, a licensed product. And Georgia, do you want to tell them the good news?
Well, we are officially going to have a official licensed Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog store at Fighters First. It's going to be available, and I can't wait. It's a lot of cool designs, and it's here in, well, you can get it anywhere, but the store is going to be in Tampa. Like it's Tampa, so it's really cool. So I was excited about that. I'm like, oh my god! I thought, talking to you that you were like in Los Angeles or New York when you said you were in Tampa. I'm like, he's local. This is awesome. Like we can.
I'm a brand new
work
local, but
together.
I'm local. Yeah.
Yeah. You're local-ish.
I'm a
You're
transplant
about
like everybody else. Like
yeah.
yourself,
So
actually. You've only been here, what, like 3 years now?
I've lived on and off here for about 15 years. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know I
Yeah.
had heard somewhere that you had moved back in like 2018 or something like that.
Yeah. I lived in England from 2013 to 2018, but and I just turned 34, so about half of my life I've been in the States. So yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll get into all that. We'll talk about your journey. We'll obviously talk about your father and some great stories you have about all that. But we did want to make the announcement. Go over and check out fightersfirst.shop. The British Bulldog collection is live. You can get it right now. We have 3 designs. Me and George are going to be working together to put a lot more great designs in there. Great thing about her being in Tampa, great thing about being local is I'm always a phone call away. We can get some great stuff going. I didn't want this to be your traditional licensing deal. I wanted to be more of a partnership, and I wanted them to be more involved. So it's great to have the Smith family involved, especially Georgia, because if you've been following her trek the last couple of years, she's been on a mission to make sure that her father's accomplishments have been recognized. She successfully got him inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, we did have to wait a year to celebrate that, but it ended up being even better, right? Because on the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania outdoors, Raymond James Stadium, right here in Tampa, you got to celebrate that with your brother and your mother and the entire family. And then now you're on a campaign to try to get him on the Walk of Fame back in England in Wigan. So we'll talk about all that great stuff. But unfortunately, let's start at the beginning. Just rip the Band-Aid off, unfortunately. Your father passed away in 2002, May of 2002. You were 14, I believe, and your brother was 16. At the time, he was on vacation in British Columbia with his then girlfriend and went into a situation, passed away, I believe, technically from an enlarged heart. Right?
It's more than that, but in a nutshell, yes.
I mean, they did find traces of pain pills and steroids, but they said none of that had to do with his death. So
actually they didn't find that in his system, but there was unfortunately my dad had put a lot of wear and tear on his body over the years, just from his injuries and the life he had on the road. So but my dad, he was really a different person and changed a lot in the last year, 6 months, maybe longer than that. In 2001, 2002, he had changed a lot. And unfortunately, with a lot of these wrestlers like Umaga or Eddie Guerrero, my dad, Kurt Hennig, a lot of their past lifestyles and wear and tear on their body has impacted them later. And unfortunately, it's impacted them at a younger age. So, I've had to go deep into that and to find out things, because there was a lot of things that didn't sit well with me, that didn't seem right when it all happened. You know, when I was 14 going on 15, and I couldn't really say or do much about it, you know, as a teenager. But as
You were kind of
an
young
adult,
enough to, you were kind of young enough to see what, you were old enough to see what was going on, but young enough probably not to understand everything, right?
No, I understood. I understood
Okay.
what was going on. And it was just very, very suspicious, everything. And that's why I delved deep into it as an adult, and I got the answers that I was looking for. And I talked to the people, I talked to the pathologists, I talked to the coroners, I talked to everybody. I have the folder. I've looked at it inside and out. So, you know, unfortunately, people believe everything they want to read on the internet or whatever. But you know,
What,
my
you mean
dad
everything
did.
in the internet isn't true?
I know, exactly. So, but you know,
That's
my
why we
dad
ask
did.
the questions, right? That's why we get the answers.
That's true. And my dad did die at a young age, and he was a big person. So, you know, automatically it gets assumed that, you know, and I'm not saying that that didn't impact him, which it did. But, you know, you look at like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and these people, you know, they're still going. But at the same time, they didn't have the lifestyle my dad did. They didn't have, you know, they didn't put so much wear and tear on their body, injuries and whatnot. So there was a lot of factors to that. But yeah, so sorry, didn't mean to.
Well, no, I mean that actually answers a lot of questions in one. But kind of going into that, what I really was going to kind of go for was, you know, at that young age, how did that impact you and your brother as you're kind of like, you know, just kind of getting your footing, 14, 16 years old? From what I understand, your dad was kind of actively, I mean, he was only 39 years old, which in today's wrestling world, some wrestlers are still in their prime in their 40s. And for the fact that your dad had an entire career from the time he was like 15 years old all the way through to 39, when he was kind of making another comeback from injuries and stuff. He had done a couple matches with your brother, who I think was 16 at the time, and he was kind of training to try to get himself back in shape and to get another run from all accounts. And you could tell me further about that, but I was just kind of the suddenness of losing somebody at only the age of 39. If you could just kind of touch on that, how it kind of affected you personally, your mom, and your family.
Well, at the time, like, it was just like a lot of denial, because it was like, what? And then obviously, like, the reality would set in. You know, the phone would ring and you'd answer it, and he wouldn't be there. And but I felt, me personally, I felt ripped off from, because I was like, you know, I felt like he had so much more to do, and he had so many more things to accomplish, and the things that he wanted to do. There was dreams that my dad had outside of wrestling that he wanted to do. And,
Like
you
movies
know,
and stuff like that?
yeah, he wanted to be a stuntman. My dad wanted to own a gym. My dad wanted to open up a wrestling school. And I feel like it just was cut just short. And it was like, and, you know, to this day now, you know, he's been gone, you know, nearly 20 years. And it's like he's missed so much of mine and Harry's life. But, you know, it's crazy with my dad. He was only here for a short while, but the time he was here, you would have thought my dad was here hundreds of years. You know, when I was doing that Icons documentary, the freelance guy filming us, he was like, just hearing your dad's stuff and watching his footage and all the looks he had, he was like, your dad's just like, he's just always evolving. And it's like, this guy's like in history, like this guy broke records, like his legacy and what he did when he was here in nearly the 40 years he was here is like, he's impacted so much. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. But you know, that's like the plus side of it. But obviously, yeah, that was it was a devastating blow. It was something that, you know, I'm frustrated, and I'm just, you know, I'm still like disappointed, not in him, but just like the situation, because I'm like, this isn't the way it should have happened. But, you know, we've had to proceed, and obviously in life things happen, things change, and you just have to go with it. And you know, if I have advice for somebody that's lost somebody close to them, like a brother or sister or a mom or a dad or a child, the best thing you can do is just time. Obviously, it's not going to erase
it's cliche,
everything,
but that's true. Yeah.
but time will, it's the best kind of healing method, and just to, remember all the good times.
Yeah, it's definitely cliche, but it's true. Time does heal. Time. I don't like when people say time heals all wounds, but time helps you manage those.
It helps you manage. Yeah, it just kind of numbs it a bit.
We've all lost people very close to us. Maybe I haven't lost somebody as close as a father, but I have a totally different situation than you. You have a totally different situation than someone else.
Correct.
And everybody deals with it a certain way. I hate when people tell somebody how to grieve. That's just not realistic. You grieve the way you want to grieve. At the time, obviously, he was in the middle of doing, like you said, a lot of projects. But now that we kind of ripped that Band-Aid off, let's go back. So you grew up in a famous wrestling family. I kind of did the little slip of tongue in the beginning. Part of the Hart and Smith family. Your dad's side of the family, obviously, his cousin, the Dynamite Kid, that whole connection going back to their childhood. I definitely want to touch on later. I heard a story about when you finally did meet the Dynamite Kid much later. I'd love to share that story. And then, of course, the other side of the family, your mom's side of the family, almost everybody in that family is a wrestler or in the wrestling business or been around the wrestling business. Obviously, your grandfather, Stu, your uncles, Brett, Owen, Bruce, Keith, like the whole family. But there's also been a lot of tragedy with that family as well. Unfortunately, obviously, people like your dad, people like Owen, even Dynamite Kid, who just passed away a couple years ago, only at 60. So that's not terribly old. I mean, he lived a lifetime a few times, but that's still not terribly old. What was it like? And I kind of heard you talking about, like, as a kid, you guys would go to the Hart family house in Calgary. You and your brother were born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Right there in the thick of all Stampede wrestling days and all that stuff. What was that like as a kid, like growing up around all that? Did you even realize as a kid what you were a part of?
I did, because we were all, like, my cousins and we were all so different. And, like, my best friends growing up were my cousins. I've got, I think, like 40 or 41 first cousins on my mom's side.
It's crazy.
Whereas on my dad's side, I've got like 4. So, I mean, and whenever we'd be on the school bus, driving past my grandpa's house, the big brick house, all the kids on the bus would be like, when I grow up, I'm going to have that house. Oh my God, that house has got a ring. And it'd be like me and my cousins getting off at the bus. And it's like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And there was just such a cool aura and atmosphere in that house. And, it was just always warm and just always the place to go to. Yeah, it was, I wish, we still had it in the family, but, lots of good memories, lots of bad memories, a lot of things, a lot of stuff happened. But
I feel like y'all rebuilt the house here in Tampa, because almost half of you are here.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I wish. But...
You, Natty, you want to go even further into the extension of the Hart Dungeon, Chris Jericho. Like,
that's true.
That entire, like, there's so many, like, considering that y'all moved to Tampa, which is like the hotbed of all the wrestlers, like, living here. I'm surprised at this point I have not come across any of you. Like, you live very, very quiet lives, but only one I've seen even remotely in public is Dave Bautista. And Titus. I've seen Titus a few times because Titus is
everywhere. You'll see Titus. He's everywhere. He's
everywhere.
Always doing stuff.
He might as well be the mayor of this town.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I say that all the time. I think he will be as well.
With the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised. But we're not going to get into politics. Titus does a lot of great things for the community. If you're around Tampa, you know. But growing up with all those cousins, and I know I heard your dad say a very long time ago, and it was kind of like a promo, but it was real too at the same time. I've heard you say where he's like, my daughter will never be in this business. My daughter will never be around this business. My daughter will never be like, look at the people. No, my daughter, no. How real was that?
Pretty real, pretty factual. And, there's been a lot of amazing things that the wrestling has given me and my family. And, I'm very, very lucky and in that sense, but there's also times where I'm like, I can see why my dad was like, don't just it's just not for you. And it's true. I'm going to leave the wrestling to Harry, who loves it. And, he's 6'5", wrestling pedigree, made for it. I just never really got into it, but I'm very curious. I kind of want to, if I ever did a YouTube episode, I kind of want to go to Natty's and TJ's and be like, hey guys, I'm trying it for once.
Go take
just capture it and get obviously just learn.
You gotta be careful. They got wild parties over there.
Yeah, but I probably won't.
I see what Natty and Jenny do. TJ just in the background, oh my god. So I don't know if that's the way to go, but
well, I mean, I don't know of any other wrestling schools here, but I just thought for fun. But in general, yeah, my dad was just in his era and growing up and in England and in Canada, and when he was wrestling in the States, it was women. He just, it was different. Back then you didn't have the Charlotte Flairs, you didn't have the Sasha Banks, you didn't have the Natties. It was obviously, my dad was a part of the Attitude Era, and it just kind of was no, I played with Barbies, Harry played with their wrestling dolls, and it was yeah, that's where it is.
I've heard you say that before, and I wanted to scream at the screen and disagree with you about a couple names, because yes, women were very much a part of the background. They were valets, as you mentioned in one interview, bra and panty matches and stuff like that. But coming up in your dad's era, there were women like Sherry Martel, there were women like the Fabulous Moolah before that put in that work, that were laying the groundwork for what women do today. So it wasn't they were impossible. They didn't get it in WWF.
But Sherry Martel, I wouldn't remember that, her wrestling. I remember her being a valet. I mean, I'm sure if I said to my dad, I want to be Harry's valet, he may have been more for that. But me actually getting in there and wrestling, that was something he was it wasn't.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree. I have a daughter, and while she enjoys once in a while looking over my shoulder and watching that, or watching the UFC, and then she'll come and try to put a chokehold on me, I feel bad for the boys that try to date her. But that's what dads do, right? We protect our daughters no matter what. But having a dad that's always traveling, always on the road, you hear both sides of the story. Some wrestling dads do whatever they have to do to be home for certain events. Like Chris Jericho, just posted being at his son's senior game. He's always found a way, no matter if it's on tour with Fozzy, on WWE, WCW, now AEW. He's always found time. Then you have other ones, unfortunately, like Dusty Rhodes has shared his story in the past, where he wasn't really there for Cody and mostly not there at all for Dustin growing up. What was it like with you and your dad? And was he around as much as, obviously probably not as much as you like, but was he there for the big moments? And was he there when you needed him?
He was so busy. So there were, I mean, I'd see my dad at home, when he'd be relaxing and stuff and would just want to just chill and whatever. But when it came to a lot of my big events, unfortunately, he was only there for a few of them because of his schedule. But yeah, that's another reason why I feel, as I mentioned earlier, ripped off, is because becoming a teenager and becoming an adult, I needed a father. I needed him, as Harry does, as everybody does in some form. So yeah, there was a lot of things, and that's another thing. It was I just feel there was so much that he had missed growing up as well. And but that's kind of the way it was.
Yeah, especially when you hear about the 80s wrestlers, 90s wrestlers, a lot of times that is the same story, and it's unfortunate. Ric Flair famously wasn't there for a lot of his childhood, for David Flair and even Charlotte, aka Ashley Flair, same thing, really wasn't there that much. And as adults, they did reconnect more.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately, like you said, was stolen from you because your dad passed away.
Correct.
Right as you were kind of getting into that age range where you could have used some guidance and used the parental situation.
But he tried, he did try. I had some swimming competitions and meets and things, and sometimes I would be picking my head up in the water with the goggles and see my dad in the audience, and I'd be like, oh wow, he made it. He's here. But it was just everywhere we went with him, he'd get stopped, or like there'd be a huge crowd around him everywhere we went. So it was always
he was one of
big
my
thing.
favorites too. So
yeah. So my dad, he never. I think I saw him twice say no to a picture or to an autograph, but that was it.
Yeah, he always seemed, and I've only come across him twice in my life. He always seemed very kind of reserved, quiet. He'd laugh and joke with people, but I never really saw him like say no to a fan. I never saw him because I saw him back dating myself. I'm 44 now. I saw him back in the day in suburban Maryland. I grew up in DC, outside the DC area. Suburban Maryland, there was a place called the Capitol Center, and the WWF would come there often. I had a lot of like access, not backstage access, but a lot of us would sit there and be able to like go into like the parking area afterwards and see like the wrestlers coming out and getting ready on the buses and getting their cars. And he would always, like, the 2 times I've seen him, both times he stayed for like an hour, hour and a half, like signing autographs, doing whatever. One time it was with Owen. Another time I think it might have been the Anvil or one of the other foundation members, but just stayed forever and just signing, talking, joking. Obviously that was pre like cell phone era and stuff like that, so there wasn't a lot of pictures and stuff. Some people had their little Kodak things, but yeah, like I said, dating myself. But your dad had a legendary career, and it's not all negative, obviously. I just wanted to kind of like get that out of the way. But let's talk about some of the more epic moments, right? So your dad started wrestling at the age of 15, growing up in England. Him and Tom Billington, aka the Dynamite Kid, started tagging before they ever came to WWF. You're talking about going to Japan, learning their craft, coming to Calgary, learning their craft, obviously hooking up with the Hart family as well there, which later would become hand in hand. But how many of the stories did you hear about his start in wrestling? Do you know a lot of that like epic story, like how he got like really going?
I knew he wasn't too, and this is where I get it from. He wasn't, too into school, and he was also born with measles in his eyes, so he had to wear like these big thick glasses, and kids would make fun of him. And like when didn't have the glasses, he couldn't see on the board, and like he just wasn't into it. He just, he didn't really at that time didn't care for a school.
Yeah.
So at the time he was kind of hanging around with like not so good kids, and my granddad was like, we got to do something about this. And he knew that Tom Billington was with Ted Betley training, and he was like, okay. So he got my dad, like he wanted my dad to like get into activities and do things, and didn't want my dad to go down like a bad path. And so that's how my dad fell into that. And my dad's first practice, he wasn't really into it. He was just like, oh, this is a lot. Like, this is so exhausting. I don't like this. And my dad described it like it was like a Rocky training. Like, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And it was just like, and he'd make my dad like ride the bike like at 6 a.m., delivering fruit to the people in the village, delivering newspapers. And all right, well, you got a fence. Well, you got to climb that fence with everything. And it's like, it was a lot of work. And my dad, but it set in that discipline at a very early age. And then it just kind of took off. I fell in love with the sport, and it just fit in. And then, next thing you know, he's 15 and he's on World of Sport. He's the youngest wrestler on TV, youngest pro wrestler on TV. And when he would go back to school, kids would be like, oh, that's where you've been. That's where we've seen you. And, the principal, he made some comment to him about like, you're just doing fake stuff or something. And my dad, I don't think went back. He just proceeded with wrestling and just didn't look back. And, that eventually took him to Canada. And that's where, Tom Billington first went. And then my dad followed. And then it just kind of came from there, really. And my mom saw his picture because my dad wrote a handwritten letter to my grandfather, Stu, saying he wanted to wrestle and train for their promotion. And my mom happened to see that picture, and I guess it was love at first sight. And she met him, and like that was it. And, my dad just kind of like, like you said, my dad's very quiet, very shy, and he didn't really want to do anything wrong. And, but, obviously they got together, and here Harry and I are. But yeah, that's kind of how he got into it, at a very young age. It's crazy. And he was only really small and skinny, and, but you could see he had something then. He was special.
Yeah, you could definitely see his body transformation over the years as well. Like, he went from, both him and the Dynamite Kid were both very skinny, scrawny. Mm-hmm. And I heard somebody else mention it to you in an interview. Like, it does remind me of Dynamite Kid's nephews that are wrestling now. They're both kind of like along that lines, kind of like scrawny, wiry. Your dad had a little bit more stockiness and build to him, but not like he developed into. He definitely put that work into the gym. He definitely put his work into the body. But there was also other things that went along with that, right? So people don't realize, I don't believe, it's very popular because he carried on the British Bulldog gimmick after the tag team. So as a tag team, they had gone on a number of years in New Japan, Stampede Wrestling. Fast forward to finally getting their opportunity in WWF. They had a nice little run there. When they went to WWF, obviously worked a lot with the Hart Foundation, worked a lot with all the great tag teams of the time, Barbarian and Warlord, Demolition, Road Warriors. Like, I think I remember them pretty much working with everyone. And it's kind of ironic, too, that you think about how your dad is a powerhouse, but he was only about 5'10", 5'11".
He was actually over 6 feet.
Was he?
Yeah, he was.
I've seen him like standing next to other people, and I was just like,
No, I've got from his medical paperwork, and from crown to feet, he was 6, a little over 6 feet.
Okay, because I do remember him standing next to Sean, and I thought Sean was only about 6'1".
No, I think he was a little taller than Sean, but yeah, he was actually, he may have been even 6'1", but he was definitely over that 6 feet mark. And that's his medical paperwork.
But even then, you're talking about an era of giants, right? Like, I remember seeing him and the Dynamite Kid trying to pull Andre off of Hulk Hogan. And they were just like fleas compared to Andre. Hulk Hogan, obviously, at the time was huge. King Kong Bundy. And yet here, your dad is sitting there like body slamming some of these guys, Earthquake, Typhoon, like all these different like monsters, which even added more to his aura, right? Like, he's his powerhouse. One of my favorite feuds is with him and Shawn Michaels, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Coming up, they really only had like maybe a 2 or 3 year run before Dynamite got hurt. He hurt his back, and between that and the situation with the Rougeau brothers behind the scenes with Dynamite and Jacques, it kind of led to them kind of going separate ways and the Bulldogs leaving WWF. Now, they had a memorable run when they did, obviously. And from a marketing point of view in the 80s with Matilda at ringside, which was, I always loved the Bulldog. I don't know why. I wanted one as a kid. I was like, the Bulldogs got one. I want one. My mom would always say, no, we already had a dog. And I'm like, but that dog's not a Bulldog. And then she'd be like, well, they drool a lot. And I'm like, I don't care. Yeah. I'm not cleaning it up. I'm a kid. But I was always a huge fan of the gimmick. I was a huge fan of both of them for different reasons, kind of funny enough. The teenager in me was like, I love Dynamite Kid because he's hard-nosed. He does all the put your body on the line, technical stuff. And the fan in me, your dad, because the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, was the powerhouse. He was the huge moves, the press slams, the everything you loved back during the 80s and 90s. And then, of course, they have their falling out. Was there ever a more public reason other than, all I've ever heard is the reason they fell out was Davey wanted to stay with WWF and Tom wanted to go, and it messed up their contract situation. And that's kind of what led to them being bitter towards each other. Is that true? Or what was the real story behind the separation?
True. Yeah, that's true for the most part. Dynamite was just really, really set in his ways with staying in Japan. And my dad, well, at the time, I think they were kind of on and off in Japan. And my dad wanted to earn more money. and they saw Vince at a show in Japan, and Vince was like very complimentary towards them and just said like, you guys are both looking great, and how are you? And Dynamite, would you like to come back? And Dynamite said in about 10 years or like never, just kind of like made some remark, and Vince was like, oh. And Vince was like, oh, Davey, you look good. And Davey said, oh, yeah. And Davey said, you know, I'm open to going back. And Dynamite didn't talk to him on the whole flight back. And when they got to the airport, my mom she was with baby Harry, and, you know, Michelle, Tom's wife at the time, she was getting Tom, and they were getting them like routine, whatever. And Tom went one way, Davey went one way. And they was just kind of like.
Never talked again.
Never. Yeah.
I know I read, and we'll keep on Davey's career in just a second, but I know I read later on the infamous book, right, that Dynamite put out that was just bitter towards everything.
Yeah.
He bashed your dad. He bashed everything. And unfortunately, your dad passed away before any kind of reconciliation could ever happen. You know, we talk about a lifetime they've lived, but he was only 39 when he passed away. Like, considering all that your dad did in the business, from old school wrestling to WWF, to WCW, back to WWE during the Attitude Era. Like, your dad had been around for what seemed way longer than it actually was. And it just goes to the impact that he had, obviously, on his career and the people that watched him. Was there ever any thought in your mind that eventually they would just squash it and eventually come back?
No. Never.
It was always like set in stone.
Yeah. And we actually went to England in 98. It was when my dad was signed with WCW, and he was did a few appearances on WCW. This was like July or August now, and it was like Harry's in my summertime break. And one of the big perks with WCW was my dad was going to be getting a lot more time off and a lot more money. So it was like win-win. So this was like our first real vacation that we went with my dad, and we went to England. And we went to Spain. We went to Benidorm for like 10 days, and we were in England for like the whole summer. We were there for like 2 months. And I remember my mom brought up, because we went to Dynamite's mom's house. We went there and we saw her, and she was nice. And because obviously like they were still, you know, my dad was half Billington. They were still kind of family, obviously.
Yeah.
And my mom said,
they were legitimately first cousins.
They were legitimately first cousins, yeah. And my mom, you know, said, you know, do you feel like maybe we should go see Tom? And my dad was like, no. My dad said, like, if we go over there, he's probably going to try to like do something, like he's dangerous. And my mom said, okay, we won't go then. And like that was that. That was that conversation done with.
So Davey went back to WWE or WWF at the time, carried on the British Bulldog gimmick, kept coming out with the Bulldog and everything, and arguably became a bigger star without the tag team. He never had like a world title run, but Intercontinental champion a couple times, European champion, you name it. And then another tag team run later on with Owen. He was involved in some of the best feuds you ever have. Obviously, the biggest moment of his career, as far as a fan's point of view, was the Wembley Stadium match with Bret in '92, where you almost never see the world champion not go on last. But the Macho Man match was not the main event. It was actually Bret and Davey, which culminated on like a face versus face, like good guy versus good guy match in Wembley Stadium. I think we all knew, even though I heard Bret one time say that the fans didn't know who was going to win. I think we all knew that going on in Wembley Stadium, that the British Bulldog was going to win that match. Epic match, 82,000 or so people screaming their heads off, which is something I think is definitely missing from the wrestling world today. But obviously the situation we're in, who knows if we'll ever see that again. But that moment in time, and you at the time, 92, so you were what, 4 years old?
Yep, 4 going on 5, yep.
Were you even like, because I know your mother was there. Were you guys there too?
Yeah, Harry and I were there. Yep, we were there. We flew there. We took the train. Yep.
Oh, you remember that's cute, like the train and stuff with this kid.
Yep, first train ride.
As a little kid, I mean, obviously you remember the moment more from looking at pictures and videos now than you do like as a little kid there. But what do you remember from like that entire like scene and going on in Wembley Stadium?
I remember like it was huge and just like walking around and around and around. And what's his name? The Mooney, Tom Mooney, the interviewer, the
Sean
host.
Mooney.
Sean Mooney. Thank you. Sean Mooney was like running around, and Shane McMahon was young at the time, obviously, and my mom was like really, really nervous going on TV. And Shane was like, "Relax, it's live TV. Nothing can go wrong." And my mom's like, "Oh God." I just remember going with my grandparents and my aunt and my uncle and my other aunt, and we're trying to like find like our seats. And we were in the royal box, which was like way like in the nosebleeds. So where we were sitting, it was like little Legos. It was like Polly Pocket in the ring. It was really tiny.
Yeah.
And all we could see was just like the blocks, like the little screen blocks. And that's how we kind of could see who was winning. And yeah, that was like probably my first real wrestling memory, that and the WrestleMania 7. I remember being there. But yeah, it was a pretty crazy event that I've never been, like you said, it's probably not going to happen again. That was an event I'll probably never see again. Just because of like everything that went into it and the time of it, and just kind of like how it was meant to happen. And it was really cool.
You've seen a few in time, but not many.
Yeah.
Hogan,
exactly.
Andre, Hogan, The Rock, and Skydome, like that. Just kind of the way the crowd would turn on every single move.
Correct.
I was super young then too. I think 92. I was probably not even 15 yet.
Yeah. In person, it was like you said, it was just something that seeing in person you had to be there. And obviously, when you see it on screen, it's good too. Just like it was pretty unbelievable. And I remember my dad did an autograph session at a store called Woolworths, which is no longer in the UK. And he had like this crazy lineup. And the guy that was running the store was like, "We haven't seen this since the Beatles were here." And so it was a really, really crazy time. And right before SummerSlam, my mom and my dad went to the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. And it sold very well, obviously, but not as fast as Wembley Stadium. So it's crazy that my dad was just there, and I watched that show, and obviously there's so many people, I can't like pinpoint where my dad is, even with his braids and everything. Because my mom's like, "Well, we were sitting over there," and I'm like, I don't know. It's Wembley Stadium, thousands of people. But yeah, he was there, and then not too long after, he's main eventing there. So it's pretty cool. My dad loved Freddie Mercury, and he liked Eddie Murphy too.
Who didn't?
He met him too.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, the '80s, like epic stars. How was your dad's health at 92? Because I know he coming back before he came back to WWF in 90. He had that bad car accident, I believe, in 89.
Yeah. My dad, like it's crazy because like throughout my life, he just seemed like invincible to me. But yeah, he had a lot of, and I think I saw more of the pain, obviously, after the trapdoor incident. That's when I saw a lot of like, him not wanting to get out of bed, just him, just not really like himself, just kind of just being like, "Oh God, over this." But yeah, I remember he had like this horrible infection in his knee, and a doctor who was Undertaker's doctor, because my dad had showed this to Doug Price, who's a doctor here in Tampa, his friend, very good friends with my Aunt Ellie and Uncle Jim, and he was like, "Davey, you got to do something about this." And that Dr. Frank, his name was Dr. Frank, I think his name was, and he took like this giant needle into my dad's knee, and pulled out, like withdrew all this pus. And my mom fainted when she saw it. And because they were like, this is like flesh eating, like this is not good. And my dad was like white, and so he was like bedridden. And then when we went to England, he traveled with that, and I remember him being in bed. And there was days like my dad didn't just go from Tampa and flew straight to the match. No, my dad we stayed at my grandparents' house. We were there for like a week before the actual event. And so he had to, like, I just remember him in the guest bedroom at my granddad's, and he just was like, oh God, like he just looked like the life was like sucked out of him. And I remember watching the promo of it, like when Brett and him were going back and forth. And I was like, I thought like, how is he going to do this? But he did it, and it was a lot. And my mom was like, she was so nervous watching it because she's watching like him, like how it's going to impact his knee. And my mom was like, you see my mom like hysterical? That was legitimate. She was legitimately like worried that something was going to happen to him. So, but you know, he gave it the best he could do. And I commend my dad for that, because, you know, if I have a headache, like I'm done for the day, let alone, you know, enduring all that and trying to, and having all that pressure and nerves, and he delivered. So, you know.
Do you think that car accident, like, because you see a lot of wrestlers during the 80s, especially like with Soma pills and like the pain pills and Vicodin, and you name anything they can get their hands on. Because it's not like today where they have all the trainers and the medical well care system that WWE has, and even AEW, to where they're just constantly like, they're treated like professional athletes nowadays.
Yeah.
Back in your dad's era, they were treated like expendable talent, for better or worse. Like, you kept yourself healthy or we move on to somebody else. And I've heard a number of wrestlers say, especially from his era, that you were always afraid of losing your spot. Mm-hmm. So whether it was, you know, pop a bottle of pain pills to get through your match to keep your spot, and then later on they becomes an issue. I won't talk about all your dad's vices, but do you think that car accident kind of like started the pain pill like situation?
No.
Or was he like somebody who didn't want to do like that?
No, no, I didn't notice any real issues with him throughout my life up until the trapdoor incident. That's when I noticed that. But all throughout my life, my dad was, he actually like recovered really fast. And like with that car accident, it was a really, really bad car accident. But, you know, my mom helped him with the healing process, and my dad, you know, his therapy was the gym. You know, that's all. And to my dad's size, how he got there, my dad trained for 10 years to get to that size.
Yeah.
That didn't happen overnight. So it was, you know, the gym was his life. That was, you know, he'd wake up and do that. He'd come home and do that. Like, he'd go to the gym, you know, twice a day sometimes. So that was his way of coping and recovering and focusing. And my dad wasn't the type to just like sit around and like, I mean, up until the trapdoor incident, he was always going. Even when he got hurt and he returned back in '99, once he had like his goal and mindset, he was back. He was training. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about the trapdoor in a second, because that kind of leads into almost another chapter in his career, because obviously after 92, fast forward a little bit, Montreal Screwjob happens. Mm-hmm. Brett and Davey both go to WCW. Davey followed him, I believe, a few months later, not directly, right? It was like at least a couple months later.
It was give or take like a couple months later, yeah.
Kind of leaving Owen with the bag. Like, Owen was left, poor like Owen left in WWF by himself, WWE. Does a couple years in WCW, which you said was also great because you got the time off. You got to enjoy the larger guaranteed contracts that they were throwing out at the time, which were both good for the wrestlers, bad for the business for them. But, you know, that's not your problem. You guys make what you make in the short time span that you have to make it as far as professional wrestlers go. But unfortunately, in September of '98, during a match at Fall Brawl, him and Jim Neidhart were facing Alex Wright and Disco Inferno. They had a trapdoor set up so the Warrior could kind of come in and out of the ring for his gimmick later on with Hogan. And that trapdoor was not very secure. Your dad was hurt severely off of it. A couple other wrestlers were also like hurt and like messed up because of it. Did they ever lead to any kind of lawsuit or any over that, or was it kind of like they kind of like paid him money to kind of keep quiet? Because I never really heard anything about that.
Yeah, I'm actually like very annoyed, like, because my dad should have done something. He should have sued them 100%. He should have done that. But at the time, it was like my dad was like, every day when I go in there, I put my life on the line. Accidents happen, you know, you kind of, and I think he thought WCW would have his back, literally, and they didn't. So that's like another.
He had what, a spinal infection?
Yeah.
And then he was like hospitalized for like 6 months or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy that lawsuit never happened because, and did they like financially take care of him or just like nothing?
They just sent him his papers and a FedEx. My dad was in the hospital, and my mom gave him, because she got it delivered to her, obviously at our house, and she gave him the envelope, and he was like, "Well, guess I'm fired."
Seemed to be the method that Eric Bischoff and them did quite a bit. Heard it with Steve Austin, Jim Ross, a number of other people. Just kind of their MO at the time. You're expendable, and that's what it was.
So that was really disappointing.
Yeah, it definitely was, but I think it actually benefited in a bad way, obviously with the injuries. But as far as his career going back to WWE at that point, you know, he had his feuds with Shawn Michaels, which even back, like I can go all the way back to 1992. Like him and Shawn, to me, had the best chemistry. Mm-hmm. I remember one time, I think it might have been Saturday Night's Main Event. Your dad picked him up with one arm, like Shawn was like latched onto his arm or like an armhole or something. Your dad just picked him up.
Yep. There's a picture of that. Yeah.
And that was one of my favorite moments, like as a fan, because I was a huge Shawn Michaels fan. As a kid, it doesn't take much for us to find a reason to like a wrestler. And I think I've told this story a dozen times, but when I was like maybe 9 or 10, Shawn was in the AWA, and his last name is Michaels. My first name is Michael. Like, it's like nobody knows who he is. You always want to be the guy who likes somebody who's going to be great, or you think's going to be great because you feel like you have like kind of like an ownership, like you found them first. Mm-hmm. And so when I used to watch Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty and the Rockers, I was like, A, they were exciting. I knew they kind of were going to be stars. I didn't know how big at the time because it was AWA versus, you know, the global WWF over on the side. But I was always a Shawn Michaels fan. And of course, he ended up being one of the greats of all time.
Yep.
But your feud with him and your dad was epic. And the fact that your dad, and I've heard different people say this about your father, that some people said he wasn't that great on the mic. Other people said he just didn't have the material to work with, and you never knew if he was good or not because they just never gave it to him. Mm-hmm. So you never really know. But he had some of the best mouthpieces in the world. Like Jim Cornette was by his side. He had Clarence Mason, I think was his name. Like he always had like these mouthpieces that could really like talk for him. Jimmy Hart was around the Hart Foundation for a little bit. There was always somebody around that could just run, like talk. Owen could talk his ass off. Like, mm-hmm. You know, so your dad never had to. And I always remember, I don't know how much you remember this. So there was a scene where Shawn was getting ready to fight, may have been going into the match with Brett. And Jim Cornette accused Shawn of like trying to sneak around with your mom. Mm-hmm. And everybody in that scene was into it. Like your mom slapped Shawn. She had her lines. And your dad was just sitting there behind, like looked like he was completely uncomfortable with the whole situation. Like he was sitting there just kind of like stoic. He's just like, where's this going? Until like somebody like said, all right, here's your cue. Go attack Shawn. And once he like attacked, like once he says, I think Shawn said like, don't flatter yourself or something like that to your mom.
Yeah.
And then that point he's like, all right, oh, that's my cue. And he like flipped the switch and he went from like zoned out to just like attacking Shawn. And I always like, cause I was watching so many clips of getting ready for obviously our big launch with the clothing line and talking to you. And I just wanted to kind of like refresh my memory. And I'm just like watching this clip and I'm like, as somebody who's known enough, I hate to say breaking kayfabe, like knowing behind the scenes a little bit, just watching that whole scene play out. And Jim Cornette's like trying to get everybody into this thing. It's like, can you believe this happened? Can you believe you would do this? Blah, blah, blah. And your mom's into it. And Davey's just sitting there. He's just like almost stoic the whole time. But mm-hmm. when those two would get in the ring, they just had such chemistry. And I remember your brother actually, funny enough, saying, like, was he ever Team Brett or Team Shawn? And your dad would go back and forth depending on the day. like depending on the day, like which was crazy to think that anybody is part of the Hart family would not be 100% Brett all the time. But it also shows that Sean wasn't quite as bad as people all kind of made him out to be. It just depended on what side of you were. And your brother, I guess, grew up a huge fan of the Clique, like Sean, Kevin, Scott, X-Pac, all that stuff. Which is kind of, I mean, but they were also the cool Clique. Like in that era, when your brother's a teenager, they were the cool kids.
Yeah.
So it's definitely understandable why he would be such a huge fan. Now, your dad comes back in, I believe you said 99, has a chance to work with some of them. He had a chance to work with the late Eddie Guerrero, which I believe was actually his Davey Boy Smith's last televised match.
One of his two. So they filmed Metal before that, and he wrestled Midian, and then Eddie Guerrero. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure how they did it. I can't remember if Metal was on, if they filmed it before or after Sunday Night Heat, but they filmed it at the same night. They filmed Sunday Night Heat, Metal, and SmackDown all at the same time. And yeah, so those were him and Midian, or Eddie and Midian, were his two last matches televised.
And then they have a falling out, have another release, and then he kind of, is he rehabbing at this point? Like, because I know, like, so 99 to 2002, that's a 3-year window. He kind of came back with a different look too in 99, by the way, because like he's in jeans now. He's no longer wearing the tights. He's no longer wearing the I don't even know, the trunks. He's now like wearing jeans and kind of coming off, I guess, trying to be more Attitude Era. It was always surreal to me to see him coming out in just jeans and boots. Like I was just like,
people either love that look or they hate it. It's no in between.
It fit for me, and it's not anything personal towards Davey Boy. It just didn't look like Davey Boy. It looked like almost like he didn't want to be there. It was like, I'm being forced to come out here and fight somebody. And he had some epic matches. He had matches with Triple H and The Rock and everything else going on at the time. And then 99, they have their falling out. He kind of separates from the company again. At that point, and I think your brother started training, at the early age of like 8 or something like that, right?
Yeah, so Harry, his first pro match was when he was 8, yeah. And my dad, he got released. It was it was the week after that Eddie match. So that match was May 23rd. So he got released the week after in 2000.
Was there a specific reason?
I think he had shown up to like the show late or something, or he had brought a guest, and like I don't know, I don't think like they liked the look of the guest or something. But it was in Vancouver, and it wasn't like in Calgary. There was a Calgary house show that Saturday, there was one in Edmonton on Sunday, and then that Monday was in Vancouver for Raw. And my dad went there for TVs, and he brought this guy named Jaden. And Jaden, meant well, but it was kind of like, my dad was there to work, and like he just shouldn't have brought. I don't know. I think maybe my dad may have known like it wasn't going further there, and maybe he just like wanted somebody there with him. I'm not sure, but he brought this guy Jaden, and then he came home and he was really disappointed. But my dad didn't really dwell on it too much. No, what am I talking about? He didn't get released then. He got released, it was like December, because he was still under contract with them. Sorry.
He just
that
got
was my mistake. Yeah, so they told him get some whatever figured out, because him and my mom weren't really on good terms at that time. And there was just a lot of stuff going on. Like my dad's sister had died, his mom had died. And I think they just said like, just take some time off. That's what it was. And then it was December when he got released. Sorry.
So they just basically sent him home and just didn't use him until his contract was up. So fast forward 2002, he's kind of training, kind of trying to get his body right, trying to get back into the scene. He's doing some and by the way, your brother actually, I guess, debuted in WWE at like 11 years old or something like that, at like a house show. So that's a pretty funny story to hear Harry talk about that. I know I've heard him on Hannibal and some other shows talk about that. So definitely recommend people talking about that. Maybe we'll get Harry Smith on this show one time to talk about that as well. What were your memories of your dad the last couple years?
The last couple of years, and I'm, it's disappointing he wasn't, obviously on TV, because like, for pretty much the first years of my life, like it was just, he was always traveling, always on the road. And then, there was a point where he was just like at home, which was like, wow. And when he was going back to WWE in '99, he was at home a lot. So, I got to spend a lot of time with him and hang out with him. And, we developed a really close relationship. My dad was like my best friend. I mean, obviously you mentioned you have a daughter, and there's quite a bond there. And, him and Harry, they had like their relationship, and then my dad and I had our relationship. And as you can see with the stuff I do and the social media, you see that we had a connection, very close. And in those last few years, I got to spend time with him, and, I got to work out with him a few times. I wish I could have, today, get his help. But, I got to experience that. And, believe it or not, he made a mean poached eggs in the morning, and he made a great tuna fish sandwich and grilled cheese sandwich. And, him and I love to go to movies together, go get sushi together. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time together. And he kind of was like doing his own thing. He had a girlfriend at the time, and I didn't really care for her, so I didn't really see him as much as I wanted to. Sometimes, like, there would be like some long durations where I wouldn't see him, but it wasn't him I didn't want to see, it was her.
What year did your mom and Davey separate? 2000?
Yes, it was 2000. Yeah.
And then, of course, people know famously that he had the girlfriend who was also the estranged wife of, was it Bruce?
Yeah. So there was that. And, but, I just kind of, like, my dad was, he was my dad, so I wasn't going to let her dictate too much. But, yeah, we were very close. And, I was always just really brutally honest with my dad. And, he was my dad at the end of the day. I know people see him as, a wrestler or this or that or hear things, but he was my dad. And I wish he was still here. So yeah, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, over the last few years, you've gone on a campaign to make sure that his accomplishments are recognized. For a long time, I couldn't even believe it when I found out he wasn't actually in the WWE Hall of Fame. When everybody else in the family had already been inducted, I was like, what? Like, I didn't realize like it was a thing that he wasn't there. Like, I just assumed he was, and I just, just took it for granted. And to see your campaign, and I've been following the campaign for a couple years, well before we ever reached out for the licensing deal. Like, I was like following, and I was like, all right, cool. And then 2020 gets announced, and of course, COVID kind of wipes out WrestleMania. They do it at the Performance Center, and then they push it back and kind of do 2020 and 2021 together for this year's big 2-night WrestleMania. Selfishly, I hope they go back to a 1-night format next year, but I don't know how much they don't want to leave that money on the table, so we'll see. But I like the epicness of one big event, like a Super Bowl. That said, like, you finally get that accomplishment. Now you're working on the Wigan Walk of Fame. Is Wigan like the hometown or just like the area? I'm not familiar with that part of Wigan is I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. So it's like I'm trying to like figure out how to compare it, but it's like the city, if not like the closest city. It's so Wigan is like the borough, like the county where he's at, where my dad was born.
And they have like a Walk of Fame?
Yeah, so they have a Walk of Fame there, and there's a lot of there's some celebrities, there's some athletes recognized there. And I know some fans, they've tried, like in the past few years, trying to get my dad in it, and like have gone and approached them in person, gone to the council and have tried to talk to them, and they pretty much got shut down or just told, like, you know, the person has to be alive to accept it. And I was like, well, I don't know, that just didn't really fly well with me. And I was like, well, my dad, he's done so much, and he's probably, if not the most famous person to come out of there. So like he just got into the Hall of Fame posthumously. So it's like, come on. And I was trying to get a hold of people and just kept getting like, you know, like this link is broken, like no reply, nothing, just dead end after dead end after dead end. And so I was like, I did a post and I was like, look, what do you think we have to do, people, to like get this going? And I was like, do I start a petition? And people were like, yeah. So Michael Finney in England, he is like the main guy that did the Team DBS for my dad in his Hall of Fame. He started the Wigan Walk of Fame. And so Michael created like the change.org page, and we communicate back and forth about it because, you know, he's in England. So we've been pushing for it, and as you can see, I'm trying to like push every day for it. But you know, I did talk to somebody from the council. The PR got back to me, and they're like, we apologize. We just haven't like updated our systems, and you know, I can't guarantee anything, but you know, I think we want to redo the museum here, and we're going to have a sports and entertainment section, and we'd love your dad to be part of it. Like, do you have an outfit you could give to us? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. And then
so they're bending a little bit.
Exactly. They're on the path of something. And Goulburn, where my dad was born, they contacted me and they said, like, yes, we will represent your dad in a way. And I was like, okay. So I don't know if he's going to get like a plaque there or what. But I did an interview with BBC. So BBC now, the news has gotten to them, and they contacted me and they said, can we talk to you about this? And I stayed up till 1, and it was 6 a.m. their time. And they talked to me, and they were like, so, you know, with that being said, do you still want to continue with the petition? And I was like, yeah. I said, I still feel he needs a star there. And they were like, okay, well, you know, if you hear of anything. So, you know, I think it will happen. But you know, anything in life that you want, it's not going to come easy, and it's hard because, you know, he's not here, but he deserves it. And he's gotten like every award, and he's been recognized in so many ways, but it's like, it needs to be brought home. He needs to come home for an award.
So 2 quick questions before I let you get out of here. And by the way, anybody who's followed your journey knows that you are a Bulldog. You don't let go. So you got your dad in the Hall of Fame, and I'm sure you'll get this too. Couple quick questions. One, I'd love to hear the story. Your brother famously had visited Dynamite Kid after all these years. He went and visited, and then a few years later, I believe you finally went and like knocked on the door. How did that all come about? And if you could just share that story, because I heard it once and I just thought it was an epic story.
Yeah. So I knew Bronwyn, his daughter, had seen him, but like, you know, as I told you, like I hadn't seen Dynamite. Like I have no memory of Dynamite before, you know, seeing him in person. And you know, I didn't know when Bronwyn, I kind of was a little anxious for Bronwyn to go there, because Bronwyn, she got a ticket and she flew there, and it was like her mission to see him. And I felt like, I just hope she doesn't get her hopes up or is disappointed. And she saw him, and I guess like they connected, and you know, she got a lot of closure on things. And you know, they kind of, obviously, I'm sure she's got maybe some issues, but you know, she's forgiven him a lot. And you know,
that's a very twisted story. So
yes, exactly.
Leave that for her to tell that.
That's her story. So yeah. You know, I was happy to see her seeing him, and I didn't really know what he was going to look like or anything until she posted the pictures of him on Facebook. And I was just always kind of curious, like for myself, like, you know, because obviously I grew up hearing a lot of things from a lot of people, and a lot of people in my family, both sides, Billington, Smiths, Harts, and I don't know. And I knew I had a friend of mine who was doing a wrestling film, and he was like, you know, it just would be really cool to have Dynamite in here. And I was like, well, I know Bronwyn's like connected with him. So I asked Bronwyn, and Bronwyn was like, no, my dad's just like really private. My dad doesn't want anything to do with any of that. And I was like, okay, I respect that. So I just left it with that. And then
was this before or after the documentary that came out on him?
Before. So
Okay.
This was like 2010 or 11.
Okay.
And I knew my granddad's neighbor, David Hinley, he had taken Bronwyn and Harry to see Dynamite. So Dynamite actually lived in Wigan, and my grandpa and that family, they live in Galborn. So it's about like a 40-minute drive. And he took them there, and he was living in like a council housing, like a brick area. And I just thought, like, I just kind of want to see for myself. I was like, I don't know when I'm going to come back here. I don't know if I'll see him again, but I don't know, just was curious. And my family, they I didn't tell them I was going either, but they just got a vibe. Like, I don't know, I may have maybe because like they know me and my dad so well, they're like, something's suspicious. She's doing something that she shouldn't be doing. And my aunt just said, I know you're going to go see him. And I was like, what? I don't know if maybe David Hinley, the neighbor, told them. I have no idea. But she was like, you just have to be careful, Georgia. Like, this guy is dangerous. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, he was nice to Harry and Bronwyn. Like, I don't know. So I went and I knocked on the door, and he was like, and I said, oh, hi, I'm Georgia. And, I knew he liked his vodka. So I brought, when Mickey Rourke did the segment at WrestleMania, he had this bottle of Russian vodka he didn't want. So my mom took it, and we had never opened it. So I was like, well, I'll give it to him. And Harry had this picture of Dynamite. It was a black and white picture of him with a belt. And it was in Japan. And Dynamite had the bald head. And so I gave him that. And I said, I'm Georgia. And he was like, holy shit, it's been a long time. And he wheeled back his chair, and he said, do you want to come in? And I was like, okay. And I was like, come on in, David, you're coming in with me. And I sat, and he was just watching his TV, and he didn't really say much. Him and my dad, man of few words, just didn't really, but he was obviously more quiet than my dad, and he wasn't expecting me to come over, but he was like, do you want some tea? And I was like, okay. And so he got up, or he didn't get up, but he made his way to the kitchen, and I could see him like leaning, and he brought me over a tea, and I was like, oh, that was nice of him. And I sat on something. It was like a squeaky. And I was like, oh, do you have a dog? And he said, no, it's my grandson's. So I think it was his wife, his newest wife, current wife. He said, it's my grandson's, so her kid. Okay. And I gave him that. And I asked him, I said, would you be interested in doing like this wrestling interview? And he was like, no, I'm not interested. And I said, like, how do you feel about like Hall of Fame? Is that something you'd ever want to do? And he said, no. And I said, like, oh, okay. I said, like, don't you think like it's something you should, like, you would want maybe? And he was like, nope, it doesn't mean anything to me. And I said, okay. And like nipped that in the bud. So I was like, okay. And then he just said, he asked me who I was staying with. And I said, my granddad. And obviously, him and my granddad weren't on good terms. There was a lot of stuff that had happened, and he beat my uncle up, my Uncle Terrence. So that didn't go well with my family. And it was like he cheap shotted him. So I wasn't going to get into that or anything. And I just said, I'm staying with my granddad. He said, how is he? I said, good. I said, I saw your brother. And he said, oh, how is he? I said, he's good. And he just said, I'm sorry about your dad. And I said, thank you. And he just asked me like how Brett was. And I said, he's good. And I said, I'd like the pictures of you and Bronwyn. And he's like, oh yeah, how is she doing? I said, she seems to be good. And it was just, I just stayed there for an hour. Once it reached an hour, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go. But I remember when I left, I was like, my armpits were like really, really sweating. Like I was like, oh my God, because I didn't know what to expect, right?
Yeah, it's nervous. And
I was very, very nervous. And he was just watching like a John Wayne film, just sipping his tea. And and then I gave him a hug. And I said, if I were to come back, is it okay if my mom comes over? And he said, yeah, she can come back anytime. I said, okay. And I could see when I gave him a hug, he was crying. So I was like, and I think it wasn't so much seeing me. I think there was a lot of regret that he was like.
I think in the final years, I think he kind of expressed it a little the way he does. but the little bit like that, not regret. I don't think that's probably the right word. Probably just that he missed out on stuff.
I think it's regret because he regrets not working things out with my dad. And I think when he saw me and he was, because, obviously from talking to my family about it and seeing him, I could see he was like, he felt like he could have changed things. And things
I think he was the only person that had the power to change things because he was
correct.
the one. He was the one that was very bitter about a lot of things. And admittedly, he said it himself. He didn't like the way things went down with your dad. He didn't like the way things had went down with a number of situations. Antonio Inoki in Japan, like he had a lot of resentment for the business. And a lot of that came from the fact that he couldn't do it anymore, that he had lost his health and he had lost his ability to go 110% at all times, which he was a smaller guy and always had to prove himself more than anybody. And then his health deteriorated. His back kept getting worse. He lost his leg later years. So there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. And he was still legendary to so many wrestlers coming up. I hate to say the name because it's such a bad connotation now, but the Chris Benoits, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, stuff like that, a lot of them looked up to Dynamite Kid. A lot of the younger a lot of the generation now that looks up to like what Shawn Michaels did, a lot of the generation before them looked up to Dynamite Kid. And because he was the hard worker, he was the one who didn't look like the muscle-bound WWF superstar. He looked like a worker. And a lot of them, like especially the ECW guys, a lot of those guys looked up to Dynamite Kid. So I don't think he realized until later in his life the impact that he did leave behind. And hopefully he did realize it before it was, too late. But
I think as well with his like relationship with Bronwyn and his kids, and I think he was
that I believe
he regretted that. And I think when I saw him, I think a lot of things came back to him from my dad and just a lot of things. And I think he was just like, and I don't think a lot of people visited him. And unfortunately, that's sad, but he kind of brought that on himself. A lot of things what happened with him were self-inflicted. So,
100%.
but Bronwyn still, she went and she had seen him a few times after that, and his health was deteriorating. But I'm glad. I think that was something she felt missing in her life. And it's just a complicated situation, but I'm glad she got that closure and saw him.
And all three kids have a different way of handling it. The sister wanted nothing to do with it. I don't believe I've ever heard one way or the other how the son ever handled it. But that was a messy situation. And like you said, time helps you manage certain things. So for Bronwyn, ended up being a little bit of, I don't know if closure is probably the right word because she probably still lost him before she had a chance to really cement their relationship. But it gave her a chance to get some stuff off her chest, I'm sure, and chance for some, love to be exchanged between a father and a daughter. So
like she got a lot off her chest because in 2011 he obviously wasn't walking or anything, but he was with it. You could have a conversation with him. He was with it.
Yeah, because he had that whole documentary shortly after that.
Yeah, and in that, like, he didn't really say a lot, but because it's cameras, and I know how comfortable he was with that. But with Bronwyn, those two, they had their own conversation, and she felt better after that. So I'm glad that they got that. If closure is the word, I don't know, but they got that. So. And
Harry's also famously said, just like you did, there's like 1 or 2 word answers every time he asked him a question. It's like, oh, Dan Spivey says hi. Okay.
He's like, okay. Yeah. that's it. Really. He's just like, oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. It's like, is he good? Yeah, he's still alive. He's good. Okay.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah.
that was pretty much the story. And the last thing I want to talk to you about before I let you get out of here, about your brother. He been in this business a long time, had a nice run with like the next generation of the Harts with him and Natty and TJ Tyson Kidd all making their debut, all kind of went their separate ways. And now here he is 10 years later, back with the company obviously some things have kind of hiccuped up between the time he actually kind of debuted a little bit. I think it was a dark match or something like that he did. And now he's been traveling with them. Are we going to see Davey Boy Smith Jr. on TV sometime soon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll see him soon.
And do they have big plans for him? Do you know? Like, can you spoil? I know you can't like spoil it, but
yeah, they've got plans.
Okay,
they've got plans.
All right, cool. Because I'm looking forward to seeing him back on camera. Big giant gold chain and all. That's kind of like his signature. And then also, I know like he's gotten his personal training license, so I don't think you need your dad. I think your brother's right there if you need.
Yeah, Harry and I used to go to the gym together, and I'm just there with him to like film him working out. So, but he also, one of the last times I trained with him, he had me do like 300 squats, and I stopped at like 280, and I couldn't walk for a week. So I'm like, hey, you go do that. I'm gonna go do this.
That works.
But yeah, he's happy and he's doing good.
Are you excited to see him back?
Yeah, I'm excited to see him back, and I know he's happy to be back there, and yeah, I can't wait to see him.
It was a long time coming. I heard people talking about it for a while, so it's nice to see him finally do it. And he got to explore his horizons. He went to New Japan, did some stuff with MLW. Like, he's been around. He hasn't stopped wrestling. I know, like, the famous theory, like we've talked about it on our other shows, is if somebody's not in WWE, then all of a sudden it's like they're dead, right? Like they're like nobody knows they exist. Obviously now with AEW popping up and other places to work and Impact still around and Ring of Honor and a number of things, MLW is doing big things. It's a whole new scene and more competition, but it is good to kind of see a member of the Hart/Smith family in the WWE. Obviously, Natty's been doing her thing. I'm sure you're still proud of her. She's constantly evolving. She got the tag titles with Tamina last year. This last year, she's been doing her thing. She's always doing her thing. Yes. She seems to be like the one consistent of that women's division. No matter who comes and goes, there's always Natty, Natalya.
Yep.
So there is that. Obviously, we could talk for hours and hours, but I will let you go. I do appreciate you coming on, sharing some of your stories, sharing some of your dad's life with us. There's so much that we didn't touch on that we probably could have, and so much more that we could do at a later time. But the big deal is that he is now in the Hall of Fame.
Yep. Soon
to be probably in the Wigan Walk of Fame. We're going to keep working on that. He is now a member of Fighters First. Go to fightersfirst.shop, put the splash on the screen. You can see it. Go get the gear. Go get the merch. Georgia's going to work with us this entire time. Now, the design's going to go on there that she doesn't approve. And we're going to keep working with her to develop that and to build a great collection, British Bulldog collection, on the website. So check all that out. Like I said, it's going to be more of a partnership. Obviously it's a licensing deal, but like we're working hand in hand with Georgia. Her and the family are going to approve every single thing that we put on there. So if anything's on there, it's family approved, officially licensed. So go check that out. Shop fightersfirst.shop. Georgia, got any last words? Tell people where they can kind of follow your campaign, get them petition signed, all that good stuff.
My dad, he just reached 80,000 followers on Instagram. So you can follow him at the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith.
Don't worry, people. The links will be in the show notes. I know it's a long thing to type out. So
that was his name. So that was the only thing available. So that's his name, the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. Again, like Mike said, there'll be a link. And Twitter, he's at Twitter_@ Davey Boy Smith. Facebook.com, the British Bulldog. And he's a really busy guy, and he's getting a lot of recognition and projects and business things and things outside of wrestling going on, which I can't wait to share with you guys in the future. And thank you guys for all your support and love for my dad. And hope you guys keep up and keep following me in my journey with him.
Well, you're welcome back on the show anytime. I'd love to actually get you back on if the whole Wigan Hall of Walk of Fame happens. We can talk about that. Maybe tell a couple more stories. But you're always welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Georgia Smith. This is Unfiltered, and we're out.